Who dat, and welcome back to the show. It is Tuesday, where normally this would be the first episode of the week, but thankfully we've got football. We had our recap episode this past Sunday. We'll do the same thing again this upcoming Sunday, and we've got more on Thursday as we prepare for another game. It's crazy how fast time starts moving when football is already here. I mean, it feels like just yesterday we were waiting for football to come back, and now we've got content every day. I've already put out 2 film studies, which I'm pretty excited about. We've got a lot of new friends and fans who are coming in from Who Dat Nation. Welcome into all of the new folks who are going to be listening to the podcast now that the season has started again. You're definitely welcome here. And yeah, it's a good time. And in tonight's episode, we're going to talk about some of the numbers, some of the tape that we reviewed. Obviously, I've shared quite a bit of it with everybody already, but there's still more to discuss. I'm sure a lot of people are going to have questions about, because I haven't made a video about how, the Saints' new rookie defensive linemen are doing. How did A.T. Perry look? How was Merriweather? Even how was Kendra Miller? All these things are things that we can end up discussing tonight, as even though I haven't made a video, I have had the opportunity to obviously watch all the tape, and we'll discuss that together as a family, because that's what we are. We're family. And this family's now got to get a shout out, because one thing I do love to do here at the Who Dat Confessional podcast is a shout out everybody who is here, being loyal, being loving, and checking out the show as it's live. TJ, Nolan Carter, King Trail, Still Bill, Mr. Jerry, Tyler, James Griffon, Poe Porter, Rainey, good to see you. Speaking of, where's Rainey in Spain? Gerald, good to see you. 007, Beacon, Who Dat, everybody, as y'all come on in to tonight's show. It is, for those listening afterwards, it starts somewhere between 7:30 CST on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that following every game. I will admit, I need to get more consistent with the time. When you have 3 kids, it becomes harder and harder to do all of that. But I promise, we're here. We're not going nowhere. So bring it on in, fam. Bring it on in. So first question I'll pose to the chat. I do obviously love to give the chat an opportunity to say their piece about various things. Dr. Billy Ocean, good to see you. What did y'all think were your initial impressions after you've been a couple days to cool down? One thing that I really think is important for fans who are wanting to elevate their understanding of the game to do is everybody's going to have an instant reaction following any game for any team. I mean, you can watch the Pels and immediately have an emotional reaction afterwards. And to sit down and watch tape, to either go through the numbers, whatever. And I actually had somebody asking me earlier, like, hey, Rev, have you ever thought about, taking your knowledge of player evaluation and scouting and doing it in fantasy football? A lot of people are really into fantasy football, and we do a fantasy football team every year, though I don't really do much with it because, one, I suck at fantasy football because I don't put in the time. And fantasy football is a completely different game than regular football, which is crazy, but I think a cool thing for those who enjoy it. But taking that time, getting to go back and definitely watch the tape, I had some things that I saw stand out that looked good on the broadcast get reconfirmed. Pete Warner looked amazing on the broadcast, and that got confirmed. Ty Summers, I thought, had a really good game on the broadcast, and that got confirmed as we went through the tape. I thought he had a really good game. So good things to see from the linebackers. And going beyond that, I like to talk about who's contributing to special teams, and we dropped the stats on that for those that remember, and we can go over those snap counts again. I shared those in the Discord right after we got access to those. Monday, midday, I think, is when I ended up posting it, maybe like 9, 10 in the morning. We put out the snap counts, and you had some pretty big names. The one who had the most offensive special team snap counts, because I do think that matters. Your offensive team sitting there with guys like Kawan Baker getting the most offensive snaps, and then defense, guys like Howden and guys like DeMarco Jackson and guys like, Nefi Sewell and Orgy all getting significant snaps on special teams. And I think that applies to when we're talking about guys who can make this roster, and when it comes to the difficulty of making an NFL roster and needing to find good depth, how do you choose a guy to be that depth? And, of course, obviously former LSU running back, a guy who's been in the league for, about 5 years now. Well, LSU's coming back to New Orleans. It really did just take Sean Payton leaving, and now all these LSU players are here in New Orleans. It's crazy. But Darrel Williams joining the squad today. Obviously, I'm not going to do too much of an analysis on a guy that just joined. Obviously, he's had a few years in the NFL, never been a full-time starter, and has had things up and down, but has also been a solid contributor. His last year in Kansas City, he won a ring and put up 1,000 scrimmage yards. So, one, the man's coming in with some hardware. That's good to see. And two, the New Orleans Saints have clearly needed a veteran with Kendra Miller not only having limited snaps in the Kansas City game, but also having a slight knee sprain that they said can keep him out for 1 to 2 weeks. Thankfully, it's not listed as worse than that, but definitely something to keep an eye on. He only had 12 snaps against Kansas City, and usually you expect to see like your number 3 running back get significantly more than that. It ended up being an opportunity for Eric Merriweather. I keep doing Eric Merriweather. It had an opportunity for Merriweather to then get more snaps, and he ended up with around like 30 of them. He basically played half the game. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think you would have seen more of Miller had it not been for, things like that. So Ellis Merriweather, who I keep calling Eric for some reason I still don't understand, got a pretty nice little showing, but it wasn't all positive, wasn't all negative, and I am curious to see if he ends up getting some starters with more experience or playing behind a more experienced offensive line, because there was one thing that I think we can really bring up after watching, really getting to the third quarter and everything. Depth is a concern, the immediate depth. I think the starters looked extremely good, but I would say that end of the second quarter, into the third, that immediate depth, the guys that you do expect to be on the team, didn't look as crisp and clean as you would want. So we'll have to see if that gets cleaned up as well. Eugene, good to see you. Who dat in South Philly? And Rainey is also right. We did release, or the New Orleans Saints did release James Washington, wide receiver. So we've slowly started to whittle down some of those names. I mean, it's only one name, but starting to slowly whittle down those wide receivers and bring in players to try and fill in various spots that this team needs. And I think running back was definitely one where you now have an opportunity to showcase them more in terms of an evaluation aspect on the field. And hopefully guys can stay healthy. So hopefully. Chemo, good to see you. Woo. Good to see you. Jerry says DA, A.T. Perry, Jalen Smith, Marshawn, Ryan Conley, etc. spoke. I would say, yeah. I mean, you also list the kicker, but I'll be honest, I don't think the kicker really has a shot to make the team. I do give him love, but I'm pretty sure Will Lutz has got that locked down, who also had a really good game against Kansas City. But I think a lot of people, when you look at Will Lutz, well, he's the starter, so of course he has a good game. But the young guy looked good. Now, some of the other names that you mentioned, Mr. Jerry, Jalen Smith, I want to see what he can do. Can he cook? Marshawn had an outstanding game. A.T., I've been confident he was going to make the roster. I think he's helped himself. Still has got to clean up some of those snaps. I really say, yeah, the stat sheet looked good, but the film did not look great, if that makes sense. I want to see A.T. going against some higher tier corners, and I also want to see him getting some of his crispness and getting his fundamentals down a little bit. I want to make sure those hands aren't moving in footballs. I want to see him continuing to grow and look better, but definitely good numbers. Definitely some good numbers there. And we'll see. Funny guy says, keep seeing people saying get rid of Pete, but we need him. I agree. It's I will say this though, Hurst has looked really good, and we've talked about there being a camp battle for that. But even if there is a camp battle for that, which there is, I'm not getting rid of Andres Pete. If he becomes the backup left guard, he's now one of the better backup left guards. And let me make a real quick comment about backups, because everybody who likes to be in New Orleans and throw shade at Jameis Winston and throw shade at rookie Jake Haener having a great game, etc. Man, I really encourage y'all to take the moments and time to look around the league and use Kansas City as an example. Y'all, there is a difference between a good backup and a bad backup. And if you look at Kansas City's quarterback play, I can't speak to them as a whole and as players because I don't study and follow Kansas City closely. Obviously, I do that for the New Orleans Saints. I can speak very confidently about player evaluation in New Orleans. I can't for Kansas City. But if you go backup quarterback to backup quarterback and you go third quarterback to third quarterback, New Orleans quarterback play was significantly superior to Kansas City. And I'd argue that significantly superior to what you'll see a lot around the league. So we've had this thing where obviously New Orleans hasn't had a winning season in a couple years, so you naturally start having fans taking shots at everybody until you get that back. Quarterback being a position that is going to take a lot of targets on their back. But, man, after I watched it, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm tearing down the Saints defense, but I will tell you this. There are multiple plays just in the second quarter when Mahomes is gone that had it been Mahomes, New Orleans would have got absolutely cooked, barbecue chickened. And I'm talking simple things, just throws that could have happened and just off base. I really say all that to say I appreciate where New Orleans does have quality backups. And after watching that type of game, I just sit here and go, well, thank the Lord Almighty that you have a game like, or have a guy like Jameis Winston as your backup. Even though Jameis did not have a perfect game. I thought Jameis looked good, but I thought Jameis looked Jameis, right? You know, the thing with Jameis is he's going to have issues where he holds the ball too long at times. He did have that. Offensive line was not as strong as it has been in the past, or at least in the beginning of that game. But I still think he looked the best of any quarterback that appeared that wasn't a starter. He definitely looked better than the 4 backups that ended up getting reps. And it just made me really appreciate and hope that you are able to have that. And I definitely don't want Derek Carr having any issues, but woof, I would not want to be watching many more reps of what we saw from Kansas City's backups, if that is truly how they are and wasn't a short-sighted representation based off one game, because I can't sit here and say I've evaluated him. But anyway, that was just a really quick little wow, just a note from when I'm going through the tape, something that really stuck out to me. Eugene says, I know ball's back when I'm watching old Saints game videos and vids of folks celebrating with brass bands outside the dome after wins. Too hype. I'd also argue that New Orleans is one of the only places in the world that not only cares about their football team the way that we do, but truly embraces the team as being a part of their culture. It just, as hard as it might be to believe, this is just not common, y'all. And I mean that truthfully. Most people in the NFL don't have the level of love that New Orleans does for their team, and I am so appreciative that they do. It's one of my favorite things about following this team and helped me fall in love with it. Sure, I grew up with the Saints as a kid, but when you realize that this area is really blessed when it comes to the fans, it makes it a whole heck of a lot easier to stick with it through the bad times. And we've had 2 years of not amazing football, right? And yet I still love doing this podcast. Why do I love doing this podcast when the Saints suck sometimes? Simple, because this fan base is absolutely incredible. So I'm not just here to sit there and brag on y'all. I just want to say, hey, I want to make sure that we never forget how impressive this city is and this fandom is, whether you're in New Orleans or whether you're in the, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana area, wherever. Just straight up, wow. Good stuff. Charles, thank you so much for supporting the channel. If y'all do want to, I just dropped the links for PayPal, Venmo, and Cash App. And if you use those links directly, that'll help pay for the film study that we're going to have to be doing, or buy the All 22 for regular season. Charles says, 26 for 26. Who dat to you? Good to see you. Me and a buddy plan on being there Thursday for the joint practice. Looking forward to seeing cornerback and wide receiver battles, and if our D-line continues to play well against the run. Who dat and God bless. Love that. Also love what you brought up against the run. I really tried to showcase in today's video. If y'all saw it this morning, let me know what you thought about it in that video. Give it a like. All that helps the channel as it tries to grow and address more Saints fans, help them be more educated about the game. But also, I really wanted to highlight it because this is where New Orleans struggled a lot last year. Remember, what we were down to, like 28th in the NFL in rush defense, and that's coming from a Dennis Allen coach team that historically has been extremely good against the run. That was an area that they had fallen off of. And we talk about the turnovers, and I do think that turnovers have a legitimate argument for being the more important of the two stats to get into the top 5. I mean, sure. But then I just looked up, it's 24th in the NFL last year in terms of yards given up through the ground. And that was something they really need to improve on. And without Demario Davis, you saw them going toe-to-toe with an extremely talented Kansas City team and doing really well against the run. Again, it's a small sample size, but what you see in today's film study, where you see Kalen Saunders just having a game, where you see Pete Warner showing those incredible instincts that made him such a coveted target for them because they love those mental processing type guys, but also doing a really good job just filling the hole and being strong. I will say that a couple of reps, he needs to get a little bit of that cleanup for the tackling, but you also saw gang tackling, which is a thing that you haven't gotten a ton of from New Orleans, and that is important because if you have gang tackling, you have reliable tackling, and that is so big. This team has had so many issues as of late, just not getting it done as cleanly as they could, and you did have that, and that was great to see. So hopefully that continues to return. Hopefully the turnovers themselves, in terms of forcing turnovers, return, and we'll see the New Orleans Saints return to being a true, in all shape, forms, and fashion, top 5 defense in the NFL. Obviously can't guarantee that just based off one preseason game, but certainly reasons to get excited, and that's why I'm excited. That's why I'm sitting here telling y'all, like, this looked really good, and we had to put it out on tape because It's everybody. And, I didn't mention it enough because, again, film studies, the nature of making a film study, especially for YouTube, is, somebody asked me, hey, can you make a video of all the rookies? I'm like, I just simply can't. It'd take too much time. And truth is, in the video that I released today, Tuesday, there's a lot of focus on that front seven. We don't talk very much about the coverage. I don't even talk about, really zoning in. And even though Carl Granderson did not stand out in a way that made you go, wow, Carl Granderson has taken a big leap. Let me tell you, as someone who has studied Carl Granderson tape for half a decade now, Carl Granderson has improved as a run defender. Now, am I going to sit here and say that Carl Granderson is the next great thing? I'm not saying that, and I didn't see him dominating, but also as someone who has been studying him since 2019, let me tell you that he looked better against the run. He looked better trailing as a backside guy. He looked like someone who was being somewhat impactful. Still not perfect, and definitely didn't win all of his reps. But you can see that he has grown since he first got to New Orleans. That's something that you want to see. Now, is he as good as Davenport was over the past 2 years in terms of being the man on the line of scrimmage as a run defender? No, he's not. But at the same time, there was a point where we talked about him being a pure liability. So all that to say, when you make these videos, you try to keep them in a format that's digestible for the public, which is, 15, 20, maybe 25 minutes. Let them really get what they need, see for themselves, and move on. And that also means you can't target everybody. I've said before that when I do my charting for like a positional group, let's say I'm going to chart the offensive line or the defensive line, that charting is going to take me about 2 hours for a positional group. And I love doing all that, but you end up missing little things. And shout out to guys like Granderson. Shout out to, honestly, Cameron Jordan, who looked like Cameron Jordan. And New Orleans needs Cameron Jordan. If there were some negatives to look at defensively, I think that when it came to the backup corners, you saw that there were some communication issues at times. There was also no real pass rush on the opposite side of Cameron Jordan that we really saw. Did not really have any pass rush. I mean, that's something that you've got to see come back. I still think the defense looked dominant without it, right? For the first 2 drives where you really saw ones versus ones. But everybody's been asking, who's going to be that guy? And Peyton Turner had some good reps, but he mostly played in with the twos and everything. Still want to see him continue to get better. Carl Granderson had some good reps, but not really a great pass rush set. And then obviously Foskey had I'll just be honest, a bad game. He did not have a good game at all. And, I was studying and comparing notes with Ross. I was kind of talking to him as I was going through the film, and he's a guy that is now on my list of has to show, extreme improvement. And not that I think the Saints would cut him. I mean, you can't draft a guy at his position and then try to stash him on the practice squad or cut him. But it's one of those situations where you simply say, like, wow, we go back to that scouting report and man, he really does need some development. That was a pretty tough break for a guy that was drafted as high as he was. And I think that it's only as big of an issue as it is, I think, for some people because of how much New Orleans needs that guy. And I'm really not trying to put all that pressure on him, but the truth is that same pressure that existed with Davenport and has existed with Turner now exists with Foskey, where they need you to be good. Like, we can't really afford to have only one good defensive end as a pass rusher, and the dude's 33 years old, right? You can't be at that point. And when it comes to defensive linemen, both Foskey and Breezy have the most snaps. So they gave both of them equal opportunity to go out there and showcase them. I mean, I think Phillips actually ended up having right around the same snaps. I guess Phillips technically would be the defensive lineman that had the most, but I know both Foskey and Breezy were right around that 40% of the snap marks. And the other bad part about this is because of his draft spot, because he was a second rounder, and that other teams looked at him as a scouting report, if he becomes a guy that can't play right now, he ends up taking up a roster spot. Now, he did contribute in special teams. I do want to give him credit to that. Foskey had 12 special team snaps, putting him in at 40% of the special team snaps. So they are finding ways to put him on the field so that he can contribute in some way. But if you end up having a second-round guy that's a healthy scratch during game day, that's obviously not what you expected him to be when you drafted, right? You expected him to be able to start contributing even as a rotational player. And that's actually what you saw from the new 3-tech, right? You saw him ready to be that rotational third down defensive tackle at 3-tech immediately. I mean, you saw penetration. You saw a good utilization of a couple different move sets. You even saw him going side by side with Cameron Jordan, with him being the 3 and Cam being either, Cam will play a 5-7-9, etc. And that's what Sheldon Rankins used to do. So if that's what you're seeing, that's exciting, right? And that's what you're hoping to see from both of them, because truthfully, it wasn't a huge disparity or difference in where they were drafted, right? It's not like one was drafted in the first round and pick 15 and the other one was drafted in round 4, at pick 130. It's not these are talking about two guys who were drafted extremely close to one another. And you're talking, 11 picks. And for one to be a guy that in his first preseason game, I want to be very clear, one preseason game of literally not even 50 snaps is not enough to condemn a guy. But you need to see him flash. And Dennis Allen even said that. You've got to see something, right? So the hope is maybe Foskey's issues were nerves related. Maybe it's the speed of the game, because that does affect different players differently. Jake Haener definitely got a smack in the face of the speed of the NFL game is far greater than the college speed. Whatever it is, you definitely don't look at that game and say Foskey's trash and Foskey doesn't need to get any reps or any starts. But you do look at it and go, hey, you've really got to show something. Why are you struggling the way that you are? We got to find a way to make that happen. I think the best thing that you can do for Foskey, and this is just my personal opinion, these next 2 preseason games, you throw him out there at least 30 snaps. Assuming you have 60 snaps defensively, I want to see him at 50% of them. I want to put him into the fire. And if he's not ready, okay, we're going to pull you out the fire, and we're going to work on that, growth track during the season and during practice. But right now, I want to throw him completely in the fire, give him as many reps as possible, and see if it's a speed issue in terms of speed of the game. Well, then maybe he'll catch up with more reps, right? If it's an issue of identifying what the negative is, I talked about play strength being something that he needed to improve on when we drafted him. And that was something that I said that Cesar Ruiz had to improve on. And let me tell you that Cesar Ruiz is no longer a man that I will go toe-to-toe with and say, you're struggling with play strength. No. My man, Cesar Ruiz, is sitting there clanking up, putting Derek Nottie in jail, and Derek Nottie is no slouch as a one-tech. So he's got to improve on core strength. He's got to improve on his actual play speed and play strength as a whole, because it's not just his core, but I think one thing that if you watch the game that you notice about Foskey, that man was on the ground way too much. And please, please, please do not just start throwing this man to the dogs, into the dirt yet. You got to give a guy talent and time who has shown that he has traits and talent to succeed in the NFL. You got to give him the opportunity to get there. So let's not turn him into the latest New Orleans meme. If he ends up being like that in a couple years, cool. But you definitely got to see some improvement. I would even argue to say that he was the worst or the biggest disappointment in terms of players that I watched in this game. I would say that there are several players I don't think necessarily did a great job or necessarily really helped themselves. And I would say that there were some who did a good job of doing exactly that. I think Connolly and Summers, had some really good plays. I thought that we talked about, Orgy being a guy that a lot of people are high on. Thought he made some plays. Even DeMarco Jackson. But when it came to who was negative for me, and Foskey's got to improve, and hopefully that he will. And he was playing opposite of Passignon a lot of the day, Passignon being your backup to Cameron Jordan. And you saw with Passignon, like, man, you just wish he was like 6 years younger. And if he wasn't an established vet, you get really excited, but you kind of see established vet there. And he looked good against, Kansas City's backups, but I don't really think there's much upside of him being the true starter on the opposite side. King Josie, so you already called him Isaiah P. Yeah, in private, having fun with the audience. Yeah. Am I going to publicly shame a guy? No. King Troll, you got to understand the difference between hanging out with your friends and talking and lamenting and calling somebody out and not giving them a chance to develop. I know you struggle with context, so. Why won't the Saints let Ball rush the passer? They did. They did in this game. In fact, we actually did a little bit of tracking. I actually went to Ross Jackson, since he's the analytics master, and we talked about some of the numbers, and you actually end up having like 15 base down plays, as in 3 linebacker plays in those early reps. And I'm curious to see if that actually continues. We talked about that in this morning's video. The only drawback to that is if that's his only job, he's not going to really have many reps in the Saints defense. And you get to a point where, yeah, that's what he did in college, and I'm not denying that. We've done plenty of film studies on that. But if that's all you can do in the NFL, you're not going to be a good player in the NFL. It's just where it is. You're not going to be a good player in the NFL. That's all you can do. He can't play defensive end. He was told to learn strong side linebacker. And I think that you have seen some of that in this game that we're talking about. You look at the fourth down, the 4th and 1. He was in on that 4th and 1 and showed his play speed, definitely got in on to making sure that play did not turn into a first down for Kansas City. I actually loved that he contributed. And hopefully he continues to do that. And, if it took him years to get to that point, absolutely fantastic. And we have talked all training camp how he has looked better at his position, more comfortable at that position. If that's the case, that puts New Orleans in a really good spot. So we've seen DA consistently put the best defense on the field. And if that defense says, all right, our best defense is a base, then he's going to do that. If his best defense is just running pure nickels 80% of the time, he's going to do that too. So I am tentatively, optimistic that Bond can improve. The only thing is, if Bond can only be a speed rusher on the outside or a guy who sugars the A-gap and, hits the middle, he's not going to get a lot of snaps on defense. You be talking about if that's his role, maybe 10 snaps a game. So hopefully he can get to a point where at this point in his career, he shows that he is getting to that next level. And that next level for him is probably never going to be, all pro or anything. But if he can just get to where he's a quality piece in his 4th year, then I'll be happy. It's just the guy's about to turn 27, y'all. I mean, if he's going to hit it, he better hit it right freaking now. He better hit it at 27. Again, we talk about how long it takes a guy to develop. Usually you see it by year 3. Usually you see it a lot younger than 27, with one exception being, Taysom Hill. But that's the whole BYU thing. We'll see how it goes. Give it a shot, right? King says a lot of people are using the game to say Alontae is not good. Playing in the slot, takes getting used to. Actually performed better on the outside in that game. I think Alontae Taylor hurt himself a couple of times. For example, the big one over the top that he gives up in the slot, that's clearly him not respecting his opponent. He underestimates his opponent's speed. He thinks that he can, because Alontae, y'all know, if you've, really looked into him over the past couple of years instead of just enjoying the broadcast, you just sit there and watch him. He has great recovery speed. And that's one of the things that he does really well. His closing speed, recovery speed has always been, very high end. And that's one of the reasons he was so good last year. He underestimated who he went up against that last play or that big play and let himself get burned. I think as a single play, that's a negative, but I don't think that's something you would consistently worry about him. But he should not have opened the door and just let that guy flame by him. I'm more worried about things that I see in the end zone, like the scissors concept that we talked about in the film study earlier today, where him and Bradley Roby both messed that up. And that's just simply something that it doesn't matter if you're playing slot or boundary or field, doesn't matter what side, what corner position you're at or anything. That is just a fundamental, you got to get this right, and you got to understand your assignment. And those are things that I really don't care what position he plays. He has to know what the role is either way. So I don't really care if he's playing the slot or the boundary. I really don't. There are some things that are just being fundamentally good, right, in terms of your position. Because letting a guy who's on a 9 route streak by you because you underestimate his speed has nothing to do with whether you're a nickel or a field receiver or a field corner, right? Nothing. You not communicating and you not switching off a corner has nothing to do with whether you're playing nickel or boundary. So I think with him, it's, getting comfortable at nickel matters if that's what he ends up being the player at. But more importantly, just making sure that you got your fundamentals locked down. And that's some of the praise that I was giving to other guys throughout, these past 2 days. That's the reason that I'm so high on Zach Bond. Not that Zach Bond is coming out here and just rocking people and shaking helmets and rattling shoulder pads. He's just playing fundamentally, holy crap, really good football. Same thing with Kalen Saunders. Comes in, you're seeing him, Saunders as a one tech, do some things fundamentally that you've not seen from a 1 or a 2 in New Orleans in years. Good fundamental football. That's more important to me. And then I think that the position thing works itself out, because maybe DA is right. Debo is better on the outside, but I don't really know if it matters as much as it is the guy playing well right now. And I think one thing, and I'm not speaking this into existence, I'm just saying think about it for a second. Everybody's expecting Alontae Taylor to become this elite player and make this even huge jump in year 2. And I'm not calling out anybody specifically in my chat who's listening live. But the truth is, historically, second years, sophomore slumps are a real thing, especially for skill position players. Possibly takes a step back, y'all, before he takes that big leap forward. Now, you hope that's not the case. I'm not saying this is the case. I'm just saying that, again, he's a young player coming into the league. He had a great rookie year, but he's still got problems that got to be developed out of him. And I think that's okay. And when I see little things like communication issues and little things like he's playing a 7-yard off from the nickel spot, which is a similar lineup that he would have outside, and he's getting burned from a 9, I'm not worried about what position he's starting. I'm worried about, okay, we got to make sure that you see on the tape why you can't have this and what you need to work on. And then everything else will fall into place. That's what I believe. It'll fall into place because he has the physical tools to do whatever he wants to do from a DB position. There are some guys who come in the league who don't have those physical tools. A good example of that would be Malcolm Jenkins and PJ Williams. Neither of them came in and could physically be any DB position, right? You know, not that I'm trying to hate on PJ, but he never had success as a boundary/field corner. I think part of that was just there is a level of play that you get at the NFL level that I just don't think that he could match play for play. But there are positions where he could match play for play. I thought that when it came to being, you know, a starting nickel corner, he was solid. PJ was solid. He was not great, but he was solid. I think he was a solid player when he had to come in and fill for safety. Malcolm Jenkins was the same way. Malcolm Jenkins was not, even though he was drafted into the NFL, he was not an elite corner and found his natural position to take advantage of his mental processing and take advantage of what he did really well. So I think once Alontae Taylor starts getting those fundamentals locked down, it'll fall into place because he has the athletic ability and he has the size to do kind of whatever he needs to do. He just has to actually get everything lined out. And if that happens, then he'll, you know, it really won't matter where he's at because hopefully he'll be a playmaker for the team. So he's got great upside. He's got great traits. I mean, it's easy to see why Alontae Taylor is going to be a good player. Hell, he's the reason that New Orleans got an interception, right? I mean, I give credit to a couple people for that. I think Brian, you know, the rookie defensive tackle, fantastic pressure up the middle on that play. That helped. It was a great job by Taylor on the PBU to knock the ball up and get in the way of that flight path. It was a great job for the interception for, you know, a guy who I don't know if he makes the roster, but damn it, I want to root for you when you're doing stuff like that, Amadi. So there's layers to it, right? And again, this is Alontae Taylor definitely didn't have a game like Foskey. There was some really good reps by Taylor in this game. Really good reps by Taylor. So Don says Malcolm Jenkins was a corner, but he really wasn't fast enough to be a top shelf cover corner. I think that there's a couple of layers to that too, Don. You know, when it comes to being a corner, you have guys who are predisposed to being better at zone. Some guys are predisposed to being better at man and physicality. You know, Lattimore is a better man corner than he is zone, but he's also really good at both. I mean, he's just elite at both. And I think with Taylor, you definitely saw last year that he can be that physical guy in your face, play that outside corner spot. But he's also had some really good plays when it comes to being 15 yards and in, which is mostly what your nickel corner is going to do. And we definitely know that Taylor has the physicality to slide down and try to play. You know, I feel like if the team wanted him to be Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in terms of that role, I feel like he could fit it, right? I don't feel like that would be putting him in a tough spot. I feel like physically he could do it. I feel like physically he could come in and be that blitzing nickel corner and love that role. I think that he could do it really well. So I think with him, it just comes down to becoming a better overall football player as a DB, and they'll find a way to put him on the field if he's playing well. They'll find a way. I'm definitely not worried about that. So we'll see what happens. Again, we're talking about a guy that second-round pick, you know, barely top 50. If you get a good starter who even becomes Pro Bowl level, not even All-Pro level, you have massively won the NFL draft. I'm excited to see what he ends up being. I really, truly am. But let's keep moving because I know we all have a lot of questions about the game. We're over 30 minutes in. Appreciate y'all who listen live. Appreciate y'all who listen after the fact. Drop them in. We'll keep hitting it. I do want to give a quick mention about our beautiful O-line play, y'all. I'm telling y'all, when I watched this game, it brought a tear to my eye. If y'all have not watched the Trevor Penning film study, but specifically watched some of the plays Cesar Ruiz does, Ryan Ramczyk I thought was good. This offensive line, y'all. If y'all don't fall in love with trench warfare, you're watching the wrong game. Everybody gets obsessed with these flashy and fast wide receivers. They don't mean anything, y'all. Wide receivers are a dime a dozen, but man, you're talking about just beautiful men, right? Y'all might feel uncomfortable saying it, but don't. These strong 300-pound men just wally mopping each other. Ain't nothing better in football than that. That's where the good is. Trench warfare. And if you don't enjoy it, I don't know what game you're watching. Woo! Good fun. All right, Billy. This is too many older and more experienced guys playing well, unless he gets spectacular. I don't even know what you were referring to, so I feel, Smoke Monday. I will say that the players themselves, as in Saints DB room, is also talking a lot about him and how well Smoke Monday is looking. So we'll see. I think, John Sigler brought up a really good point. He did a lot of study over the past few years, and generally the guys who both offensively and defensively are getting the most special team snaps are ones who end up on the 53-man roster. Smoke Monday was on over 40% of the special team snaps. So it's quite possible that he's in that conversation to make this team, not only because he's looking good defensively when used on the field, but also he's being used very heavily in special teams. As an example, like to give a counter to that, even though Smoke Monday only played 20 snaps at safety, and compare that to maybe Yiadom, Isaac, who was playing corner, Isaac was only in 4 snaps, the special teams. That's it. Whereas Smoke was in 40% of them. So it could be something to look at. I think that nobody really loves the sexiness of special teams except for Ross Jackson. Shout out to Ross Jackson because that man loves the sexiness of special teams. But when it comes to making the roster, and we're talking about guys like Orgy, we're talking about guys like Smoke Monday, that's where they're doing it. They're not doing, they're not going to be in front of May and Honey Badger. But that's where they're doing it. So, something to watch when we do our next film study, kind of see how he's playing. And I would love to see more reps from him, because a lot of these guys that we talk about being on the fringe of making the roster, it's really tough to evaluate them from 20 plays. Now, you need more. And I don't want to say that 3 preseason games is a negative, because I've actually already been pretty vocal that I prefer less preseason games. At the same time, from an evaluation standpoint, it really sucks to not have more time to get these guys and really build the best team possible. I can definitely see the tug of war between the two sides there. Don says, I want Smoke Monday to make the team because of his name. His name is too cool to not be an NFL player. It's better than the cool baseball names. It's a good name. And honestly, here's what Smoke Monday needs to do. Smoke Monday needs to play for the New Orleans Saints for a good 7 or 8 years, settle down in New Orleans, and then make him a really good, like brisket shop, like Smoke Monday. How can you not have an amazing set of barbecue and brisket with your name alone? If he puts in some good years in New Orleans and then opens him up a nice little restaurant, oh my goodness, life is set. That's what Smoke. Just listen, man. I'm trying to set you and your family, your children's children will have an inheritance if you just listen to me. Become a great football player. Stay playing New Orleans for a good 7, 8 years. People love your name. Start making brisket, and also start studying how to make great brisket right now. Just go ahead and do that now. Don't wait until you retire from the NFL to learn how to do brisket. Do it now. Let me tell you, smoke masters are not, you don't just become a smoke master. You got to put in the work. You got to put in the work. Oh, my goodness. Billy O says he ain't got to put in good years. We love underdogs. Well, that's why I said 8 years, not 12, right? Real Thesis says got to open up a dispensary. Well, you better talk to your congressman, because they trying to get rid of Delta 8 and Delta 9 now, let alone opening up a dispensary. You better call y'all congressman. I'm just saying. Does relying on recovery speed get you beat more times than not? Prime time is notorious for letting receivers run by him and quickly recovering for INTs. And can Taylor play safety? I think Taylor probably could play safety if you let him learn the roles. I would say that going from corner to safety is definitely more difficult than just going from corner to nickel. I think, sure, he could do it. At the same time, I would have no desire to do that right now. I think that if you've got the athletic profile to be an elite, whether you're an outside corner or a nickel corner, be that and see where it goes. But the recovery speed thing doesn't really bother me if you know how to use it and how to use it well. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson did it for one of the most famous interceptions the Saints players ever had when he picked off Tom Brady. He baited Tom Brady and used his recovery speed to get a game sealing interception. You can do it right if you know what you're doing with it. And that comes down to really any tactic that you employ. Because one thing that makes the NFL so great, it's a very nuanced game, right? It's some people look at football and just like, oh, it's just grown men beating the hell out of each other and one runs the football and then the other plays catch. It is far more complicated than that. And like any tool, it's the same thing like as a wide receiver. Do I risk using a dyno stem, or will that slow down my coordination with this route between me and my quarterback? Or can I actually get an effective dyno in on this route? It's so nuanced, and I have no problem with that tactic if you can use it well. And I'll even say that play, I don't have it on the screen right now to show you, but the big play that, Taylor gives up, where I just feel like he didn't respect the speed of the enemy very well. He still recovered. He got back up there, but it was just enough of him being behind that he did not have time to actually go find the ball. And he ended up playing the man. And you can get a pass breakup playing the man, but it's a hell of a lot easier to get a pass breakup playing the ball. But you can't play the ball unless you are in position. And he just was out of position, and he had to recover to get there. So there are times where that can be good and it can be bad. It really is all about how well you utilize it. And that's what preseason and training camp is for. Learn these things, perfect these things, get to where your nuance is better than their nuance. And yeah, I think that that's completely fine as long as it works. Now, if you're trying to bait guys to throw interceptions and you continue to fail, and like you're getting 4 interceptions, but you're giving up 5 touchdowns, then it's not worth it. Shout out Marcus Peters. But even then, Marcus Peters became an all-pro using similar tactics. So you can run that, and if you're good at it, that boom or bust style, and especially if you're getting more boom than bust, yeah, you love it, because anytime you can turn the ball over, it's good for your offense. So good for your offense. Don says, I think Alontae Taylor has shown too much positive at corner to talk about moving him to safety. 100%. I think what we really have happening right now, anybody that's mentioning Taylor going to safety or whatever, what really comes down to is you've seen him be good, but you've not seen the team be good in a while. And you start, damn it, we got to do something, right? The truth of it is, the annoying truth, and this goes for coaches, players, etc. The annoying truth of football is it takes a long time to become great, unless you're one of like 0.00001% of the population that is born as a ridiculously insane athlete that can dominate without great technique. And even then, those guys dominate a long time because they develop great technique. Everybody else who's just a great athlete, who's just in the top 0.1%, they've got to get great technique locked down, and that takes time. It's very rare to have you're talking about singular individuals. This is why I get into these conversations with people on social media who are like, well, there are great people who don't play football who are athletic who could play. And I'm like, no, they couldn't. You're not just going to walk up to a random construction site or steel mill or whatever and find people who can just walk into the NFL. We're talking about you have to come into the league already as a physical phenom, and then you have to be special among physical phenoms to be able to do things that others can't do without high-end, fundamentals, right? DK Metcalf was not a fundamentally sound wide receiver coming into the league. But guess what? Dude still is a guy that can pull in 1,000 yards. Now, is he the best wide receiver in the NFL? No. And I don't think anybody's going to say that he is. But at the same time, DK Metcalf, for 3 years now, has been 3 times, I'm pretty sure he's had 1,000 yards from scrimmage or more. And his rookie year was 900. And then he's got over 30 touchdowns. And that's without him being a fundamentally great wide receiver. He is not Michael Thomas level, nuance that we were just talking about. He's not. Physically just ridiculously, people shouldn't be built like that. It's just stupid. So I think that's the thing with Alontae Taylor is you see the guy doing something so well, you want to see him on the field, and it's like, well, if it's not perfect over here, maybe we can put him over here. And it just takes time to hone in and perfect your craft. And not that I'm trying to be offensive to Alontae Taylor, but he's not physically to corners what DK Metcalf was physically to wide receivers when he came into the league. It just takes time, and you got to let that process happen, right? You just got to let that process happen and see where it takes you. I hate when corners don't get their head around. It depends, Joseph. There's 2 styles. At the base form, there's 2 styles of corner, or better worded as there's 2 styles of coverage. In zone, you play the ball. In man, you play the man. So when you have man coverage, it's mano a mano, it's you versus them. The ball is secondary. your first responsibility in any form of man coverage, whether you're doing cover 3 under, whether you're doing, cover 2, just doing full cover 0, and we're just going crazy, is to lock your man down. Now, you do that with a mixture of physicality, positioning, leverage. At the end of the day, you're playing the man, and you're not worried about the ball. When playing man in good man press corners, you're not taught to look for the ball until you're convinced the wide receiver is looking for the ball. So it's not about getting your head around. It's about making sure that your guy can't make the catch. And if you get an interception, fantastic. This is why zone coverages tend to produce more turnovers, because those coverages are different. In a zone coverage, you're actually defending an area. Now, you have to be cognizant of what's happening in your area. You have to have the spatial awareness to understand who's coming in and who's leaving your zone, but you're focused in on the ball. You're focused in where's that quarterback going, and if he's coming at me, I'm going to take it from him. That's why you tend to have a better opportunity. Now, there are zone and man coverage mixes, and there are ways to run both of them on the same play. But I don't really care about the head around thing depending on the coverage. If you've got man-on-man coverage as an outside boundary guy, and you're one-on-one boundary, and you have no safety help, I don't really give a flying heck if you don't get your head around. You better lock down your guy first, and then worry about, can we pick it off if we throw the ball this way? So it's all about what's the coverage being called, right? In Alontae Taylor's case, where he got burned on that one play, I'm not worried about him getting his head around. I'm worried about him getting back to the wide receiver, because simply being there gives you a chance to disrupt the play. So then you just get to the point where some guys aren't that good. Like, there are some players who simply aren't good enough to lock down the corner and get their head around. But dang it, they better lock down the corner, because if you can't do the first part, it doesn't matter with the second part how good you are. Because there are a lot of guys in college who are really good at being a ball hawk, right? They're really good at getting their hands on the ball. But when they get to the NFL level and all these wide receivers are actually talented and all these wide receivers are actually big and strong, just because you can pick a football out of the air doesn't mean that you actually have a chance to pick a football out of the air. So it depends on the coverage. Sometimes I completely get it. Like, yeah, we want more turnovers, but a lot of times, whether you create a turnover is a defensive effort as a team, not an individual effort. I think that can get lost sometimes. It's really your ability to produce turnovers is more contingent on your ability to produce certain situations, putting the offense in very difficult spots. Maybe they're trailing thanks to your guys scoring. Maybe you have forced them into like a 3rd and 12. There are situations you can force that make it easier for you to try to dictate them to make a mistake, and that's how you create turnovers. So that's more of like what I'm looking for. I don't think individually Marshawn Lattimore is just going to pull out 7 interceptions, and then the Saints defense is ranked 32nd, and Derek Carr threw 18 interceptions, right? While that's technically possible, what's more likely to get Marshawn Lattimore to 7 interceptions, the offense actually plays to a semi-level of good, and then the defense is fundamentally sound and forcing opposing offenses into really bad situations. And that's what we saw the first 2 drives against Kansas City, and hopefully that continues. We'll see. So people don't realize how hard it is to turn your head and run 30 miles an hour chasing someone at the same time. I can't even tell you what it's like to run 30 miles an hour. And I can barely tell you what it's like to turn my head. I'm old, man. I sleep the wrong way, and I can no longer turn my head a full 90 degrees. I mean, I live in a very pampered world. If I was out in the wild, I'm dead. I'm straight up dead. So shout out to all these people who can go into a football field and do things physically that I literally can only do on Madden. Usually playing as them on Madden. It's good times. Good times. Mike, good to see you, Houdat, and I'm glad you're enjoying the film studies. Really am. Dr. Billy says, I play DB, and I'll say it's so embedded into me. I can still backpedal better than I can run forward. You think I'm crazy if I told you that there are even teams now that don't even teach a backpedal? Not that they don't teach something, it's just that there's different techniques now. Yeah, I get it. I completely get it. Oh, I went on a little tangent there. I know it gets a little weird for y'all, but don't worry. We're good. We're completely good. All right, let's bring it on back, y'all. We're going to have a few more minutes. I can't believe we're almost at an hour, but that's what happens when you're discussing all these different players at once, how quickly time can fly by. That's why I say that I just can't make a film study that includes every Saints rookie, because that video would take well over an hour, probably 2 hours, to have all the plays in that needed to be done. and it would take me an entire day just to put it all together. But yeah. What's your assessment of our defensive depth? There are some areas that I am not super concerned about. There are some areas I am. The areas that I'm concerned about defensively is pass rush as a concept. I think that there are good players along the defensive line, but I've yet to see a guy step up and be that guy as a pass rusher. Like, I honestly am okay with guys like Passignon, Granderson, and Turner, from what I've seen, defending the run. None of them are great at it, but they're solid enough, and I don't think that it would hurt the defense if they're starting. But I really need to see a guy be a premier pass rusher. I love what I see from the rookie on the interior when it came to giving him some reps to get after the quarterback. Would love to see him get more of those opportunities. But in terms of pass rush depth, I'm really worried about that edge not having that there. I also am not convinced yet about the linebacker depth. I think the linebackers look good. But again, I'm not going to take 30 snaps and be like, well, New Orleans has figured it out. I still want to see linebacker depth, especially if what we saw pans out to being DA's plan. We saw more base defense in this preseason week 1 game than we typically see. If they are wanting to move to that, well, then I definitely need to see more from the backups. I need to see more from Summer. I need to see more from DeMarco Jackson. I need to see Jalen Smith out there contributing, and whether he looks good or whether he's bad. That means I need to see more of Ty Summers. I need to see more of Ryan Connolly. And that even means I need to see more of Anthony Orji. So all these guys I'm not confident in because there's so many that are just an unknown. Demario Davis and Pete Warner are not unknowns. You know exactly what you're getting. But the depth behind there is a huge question mark. You do not know what you're getting from DeMarco Jackson or Nephi Sewell or even Jalen Smith. So you have to see more of that. So I'm concerned about that depth because it's still a question mark for me and it's not locked in. And there were times where it was locked in. All right, you knew what Caden Ellis was as a backup because he had been here for years. He was established. He wasn't a starter yet, but you knew what he could do to contribute, and then he really popped off when he got his chance. You don't have that right now, so I'm concerned about that. And I'm also concerned about the DB room because if I see two guys who have been on the team for 2+ years now, and Taylor and Roby having a communication issue, that now makes me concerned about the DBs. Maybe that's an overreaction on my part. And guess what? Everybody's allowed to have an overreaction about a preseason game. Football's back. Y'all are allowed to overreact. All of y'all who were on Twitter typing 17-0, and I saw you because you were me, you're allowed to do that. It's fun. Football's back. But I am not convinced about the Saints' DB depth either right now. And the only reason that really matters is we're coming off, 2 straight seasons of the Saints being the most injured team in the damn NFL. So I'm concerned about those until we see everybody playing fundamentally sound, fundamentally well. And that's something that we really got to make sure this team focuses on. If I'm DA, it's more important to be a fundamentally good team than it is to be a splash team. And fundamentally sound play is how he saved this defense last year. This defense couldn't make turnovers. They really struggled to be an effective defense in every format. So what he did, he just made them a great defense at the bottom level, and that was good. So I'm worried about the linebacker depth. I'm worried about the pass rush depth. I'm worried about the DB depth, specifically the corner depth, until we see them all playing fundamentally sound, and then I'm good. Yeah, and we'll go from there. Brian says, my concern is Dennis Allen. He has a bad record as a head coach. I'm not concerned about Dennis Allen. Let me word this the right way. Dennis Allen will get my blame if the team is losing. When it comes to how his team is performing on the field, I don't have any concerns about Dennis Allen because Dennis Allen is in charge of the defense. And Dennis Allen has, for 6 years, put out elite defense. Now, if this team does not perform well offensively and is losing games, it's still Dennis Allen's fault because he's the head coach and it's his job to make sure his stuff is going well. And if it ain't going well, to make changes until it is. So I will blame him for that. But I don't have any concern about DA doing his job, which is running that defense and making it elite. But I will give him the blame if this offense returns to being terrible, right? Now, if you want to pull up a coach that I have a concern with, I have a concern with Pete Carmichael until he proves to me that he can do it by himself. That's who my concern's with. Now, if Pete Carmichael sucks, which leads to the Saints sucking, guess what? It's Dennis Allen's fault. Simple as that. You're the head coach. It's your problem. But am I worried about DA in terms of making sure that his side of the ball is where it needs to be? I'm not worried about that at all. I'm not worried about that at all. So, Don says, I'm most concerned about the pass rush. I think the DBs will be better automatically if we get a good pass rush, and I agree with that. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Teacher says, I'm not worried about Pete or Allen. I feel like they were forced to limit the playbook last season with cards open back up. I think this is going to sound like I'm insulting you, teacher, and I promise I'm not. And I want to preface that because that, to me, is just something I've heard a lot of people say, like on radio shows, and they're using it to defend Pete Carmichael. I take that, I'll be honest, to me, that's bullshit. I don't like to cuss on my show, but to me, that's complete BS. That's not true. Like, the Saints were not suddenly running a crappy offense as soon as Jameis Winston went down. And you had Andy Dalton the entire season, right? Now, were there some specific plays that get drawn up for Michael Thomas that maybe you don't run? Sure. But was the offense suddenly 20% of what it was before? No. Does it have anything to do with him consistently having bad tendencies? No. Like, for example, when he consistently on 3rd and short called slant plays and was having that called out to him by opposing defenses and then didn't change it the next week, that has nothing to do with your playbook is supposedly limited. That is on you as a coach and a play caller. Now, am I saying that better talent on the offense would not have helped him? 100% more talent would help him, which is why I'm excited about Derek Carr. Yeah, no lies. 100% more talent would help out your offensive coordinator. But to me, it sounds too much of like a radio cop-out because end of the day, the offensive line was not performing in the bottom half of the league, even with its injuries. At the end of the day, that had nothing to do with the fact that Pete Carmichael had entire stretches of game where he did not use Taysom Hill, right? At the end of the day, all those injuries had nothing to do with the fact that he would call plays that were predictable, that were getting called out by opposing defenses week after week. Yeah, injuries made the team worse. Cool. But they certainly didn't result in all the problems that you saw from the offense last year. And I'm going to counter you because Dalton could make all the throws. There's no throw in the Saints offensive playbook that Dalton couldn't throw. And I don't think Dalton's a great quarterback. But I don't think his arm limited what they could do. I think it's Pete Carmichael. And that's based on me breaking down the games and what I believe that I saw. Doesn't mean that injuries did not affect this team's performance. I think it 100% did. But I think the biggest issue offensively last year was Pete Carmichael as a play caller. But it was also the first time he was the lead play caller in 10 years. So maybe he needs to be given time to get better too. And that's okay. But the playbook was not shrunk down to minuscule high school level sizes. That's not true. And that's easy to disprove. So I think at the end of the day, if you're just being honest, you've got to be, this guy has got to do better. And I think you get better by having better players. Derek Carr is an upgrade. That definitely helps. And I think you get better by having more consistent health across the board. Hopefully Thomas is healthy. Hopefully you have, better play and a step up from Rashid Shaheed. But I'm definitely not going to ever accept that argument that, injuries caused the offense to be bad. Because I don't believe it did. I think that was on the play caller. So, but I get it. I think everything can help. And I think that that's part of it. But I don't like it being used as a scapegoat to say that Pete was actually great and it's all the players' fault. Because I don't believe that. I don't personally believe that. So, if Carmichael's bad this year, he's got to go, but I'm willing to give him another chance with better talent to work with. Yeah, and I mean, not that we have a choice. It's not like we can go picket and start a strike like the writers and actors are having to do for better wages. We have to have Pete here, and we have to hope that it works out, but I am also willing to give him a shot with better talent, and now him having another year to really cultivate his offense. I'm good with that. We'll see how it plays out. I never wish negative on anybody in the Saints organization. I hope that they do their best, and I hope that translates into them looking great. That's what I want. Absolutely what I want. So, yeah, let's see if we got any more here in the chat. Dalton sure pushed downfield against the Rams. I'm just like, yeah, I hear, and the reason I said what I said, teacher, because again, it's not about you personally, but I've heard the things that you've said on a couple of podcasts and radio, and I just sit there and go, okay, that just sounds like a talking point, because if you can easily bring up games where you disprove it, well, then it definitely can't be the answer. That doesn't mean it can't contribute, because nobody's going to sit here and say that losing so many starters doesn't contribute to your team performing worse. But when you can sit there and find the plays and find the attempts and simply look and go, well, damn, why is this a problem? There's just got to be more than that, right? What do you feel about the Williams signing? We didn't talk a ton about Darrel Williams. We just mentioned that he got signed. I like it. I like that they signed Darrel Williams because, one, we talked about it. I mean, the Saints don't really have a running back. You got AK who's going to serve a 3-game suspension to start the year. The only one that you had that wasn't a draft pick this past year was Jamal Williams and Kendra Miller, but then it was Ellis Merriweather and a converted wide receiver in Kirk Merritt. So they just brought in Darrel Williams, who is a multi-year veteran. He doesn't have a ton of miles on him, but at the same time, not a guy that you would trust to be a healthy player, 17 games of a season and dominate. But I think that's completely okay. I'm excited to see what he looks like. Obviously, if we had to pull up 2 early names to look for in this upcoming preseason game, Darrel Williams, if they end up giving him snaps, and then really Jalen Smith. I really want to see Jalen Smith in this Saints setup, especially if we really are using more base defense. Well, Jalen, especially as a run stopper, was a very, very good player. So we wait and see how it pans out. We see how it pans out. And then there's going to be some guys who get a lot of snaps who end up getting cut, like James Washington. James Washington got like 30 snaps and did not really pop off, did not take advantage of his opportunities and got released, right? So we see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. I'm excited about it, but you got to see it, right? You got to see it. You think we needed a body, so it's a solid signing, is a good option as your third back? Yeah, I agree with that. You need Merriweather to become Kerry Robinson? Sure. I would say that there was not enough for Merriweather in game 1 for me to want him on the roster when the season starts. But again, he had 30 snaps. Not enough to evaluate a player. Definitely want to give him more opportunities. But also won't preclude me from signing somebody else and taking a look. Especially a guy who is immediately going to sell some damn jerseys. Y'all going to tell me that a Louisiana boy is not going to sell some jerseys as soon as he gets in the building? There's going to be some Darrel Williams jerseys out there. There's going to be some Darrel Williams jerseys. I'm going to see some. But think about it. If you get 2021 Darrel Williams on this team as basically your third running back option, that's huge. I mean, this is a dude that caught, what was he, like 500 yards receiving and 500 yards rushing for Kansas City? I know he got, like 7 or 8 touchdowns. You get that, that's tremendous, right? It's tremendous. And I still got my Adrian Peterson jersey, TJ. Still got to. I actually have more running back jerseys than I have of anything else, which is a shame because I love offensive line play the most. But y'all, we've hit over an hour. We're going to wrap it up. We'll be back Tuesday. Come check us out on the podcast live. We'll also have a podcast following the game on Sunday evening. If you're enjoying the film studies, please go comment on them. Let me know what else you want to see. If you have any thoughts, comments that you want to add to this wonderful process that we have set up to talk game, love to do it. You can also join our Discord or hit me up on Twitter or x.com. Just make sure you don't add 2 more X's. You're going to go to the wrong site at Rev Deuce Wyndham. And we even have a Facebook page. You can hit me up there. Y'all come join in. Come talk ball. Come talk who dat. All opinions are welcome. Even fans of other teams. We do a little bit of trolling in the Discord, though. I won't lie. We have a little bit of laugh sometimes. But I appreciate every single one of y'all. Who dat? God bless. Catch you on the next one. Deuces. I'm out. And we will see you Thursday.